Notification comes at 6:37 in the morning. I know the exact time because I'd been lying in bed for 20 minutes already, staring at the ceiling, running through my opening checklist in my head the way I always do before a big day. New shipment of balayage supplies coming in, 2 color correction appointments back to back. My first hire, a junior stylist named Priya, was starting her second week, and I wanted to make sure she felt supported. I was proud of that list. I'd built everything on it, from nothing. The notification was a Google alert. I set them up for my salon name about a year ago, mostly to catch when local bloggers mentioned us or when a client posted a review I hadn't seen yet. Good news arrives quietly. You learn to look for it. This one wasn't good news. 1-star review posted for Luster & Co. Hair studio. I sat up, opened the app, read it twice. Completely unprofessional. The owner has no idea what she's doing and regularly uses expired products on clients. Health code violations I reported personally. Do not bring your children here. The account had no profile picture. No review history. Created 4 days ago. I put my phone face down on the mattress and sat there in the quiet of my apartment for a long moment. My ex-husband's mother had always hated that I kept my maiden name on the business. I opened Luster & Co. when I was 28. That was 3 years before my marriage, 4 years before my divorce, and about 6 lifetimes ago in terms of who I was as a person. I'd been doing hair since I was 19, first out of my apartment. Then renting a chair at a place in Midtown that smelled like burnt keratin and broken dreams. Then, finally, after saving every dollar I could for 4 years, signing a lease on a 900-square-foot space in a neighborhood that was just starting to turn. The build-out cost me $34,000. I pulled $18,000 from my savings account, took a small business loan for the rest, and paid it off in 2 years. I have every bank statement, every contractor invoice, every supply receipt organized in a binder that lives on the shelf above my desk. My mother used to joke that I was born middle-aged. She didn't mean it as a compliment, but I took it as one. When I met my ex-husband, I'll call him my ex at a friend's birthday dinner, I was already 3 years into running the salon. He was charming and funny, and he looked at me like I was the most interesting person in the room. When I told him I owned a business, he leaned forward. "Tell me everything," he said. I did. I shouldn't have. We dated for 2 years. We were married for 18 months. I won't go into all of it, but I will say this. I spent the first year of my marriage slowly realizing that what he'd found interesting about me was not me. It was the salon, the steady income, the asset. His mother. I'll call her my mother-in-law. Though the title feels generous, made her feelings clear from almost the beginning. Not cruelly. Not at first. It was more like she had a plan and I hadn't been informed of it yet. She would ask questions about the business in a way that felt like she was building a case. How much do you make in a slow month? Do you own the equipment outright? What happens to the lease if something changes with you personally? I thought she was just thorough. Some people are thorough. She was building a case. The divorce was finalized 8 months ago. It was not a friendly process. My ex had filed claiming that Luster & Co. was a marital asset subject to equitable distribution. His attorney argued that because some of our joint household income had been deposited into a shared account that I sometimes used for business expenses, a handful of times, for amounts totaling less than $3,000 over 18 months, the entire business had been commingled and was therefore partially his. I have a very good attorney. Her name is not relevant, but I think about her often and with great warmth. She walked into that first hearing with the original business formation documents dated 3 years before my marriage, the initial loan agreement in my name alone, the build-out invoices, every quarterly tax filing, and a clear paper trail showing that the joint account deposits into business expenses or reimbursements, money I'd put into the joint account from my personal earnings and then used for business. His share of those expenses, 0. The judge agreed. The business was mine, fully, legally, completely mine. My ex walked out of that courtroom without looking at me. His mother, who had attended, which I still think is strange, looked at me the way people look at something they intend to come back for later. I should have understood then what that look meant. The 1-star review was just the beginning. Over the next 11 days, 7 more appeared. Different accounts, all new, all with no history. The language was specific enough to sound real, They mentioned my name, the neighborhood, the style of the interior, but vague enough to be unfalsifiable. Overpriced. Owner is rude. Felt unwelcome. Would not recommend. My average rating dropped from 4.8 to 4.1. I watched it happen in real time. My mother-in-law had a daughter, my ex's younger sister. She was not subtle on social media. I'd muted her accounts after the divorce, but I hadn't blocked them, which meant that when a mutual acquaintance sent me a screenshot, I could go look for myself. There it was. I comment on a local community Facebook group, the kind where people ask for restaurant recommendations and post about lost cats, where someone had asked for hair salon suggestions. My ex's sister had replied, "Avoid Luster & Co." My friend had a really bad experience there recently. She had never been a client. She had never set foot in my salon. I had the door camera footage to prove it if I needed it. I forwarded the screenshot to my attorney without a word. She replied within the hour. Document everything. Don't engage publicly yet. I documented everything. The morning my mother-in-law showed up, I was in the middle of a toner application. My client, a regular, been coming to me for 2 years, was in the chair, foils in, timer running. Priya was at the shampoo bowls with another client. The front door has a small bell on it, the old-fashioned kind. Because I like the sound. I heard it ring. I looked up. My mother-in-law walked in like she owned the place. She was dressed well. She was always dressed well. She had a leather portfolio tucked under one arm, and she looked around the salon the way someone looks around a property they're considering purchasing. "We need to talk," she said. Priya looked at me. I gave her a small nod. "I've got this," and handed her the toner brush. "Can you watch the timer?" I said quietly. Then I walked toward the front of the salon. "This isn't a good time," I told my mother-in-law. "It won't take long." She set the portfolio on my front desk like she had permission to touch things. "I have some paperwork I'd like you to look at." I did not look at the paperwork. I kept my eyes on her face. "You need to leave," I said. "I have clients." "The business," she said, as if I hadn't spoken, "was partially funded by a gift my husband and I gave to our son during your marriage. We have documentation. Our attorney believes that a good faith conversation now could avoid get out of my salon." The words came out quieter than I expected. Steadier. I surprised myself. She blinked. She hadn't expected that either. "Sweetheart, don't." I walked to the door and held it open. "You will leave right now, or I'm calling the police. Those are the only 2 options." She left. But she took her time doing it, and she didn't take the portfolio. I stood at the front window and watched her car pull away. Then I went back to finish the toner. My client, bless her, pretended not to have heard any of it. That evening, after I closed up and Priya had gone home, I sat at my desk and opened the portfolio. It was a loan agreement. A mortgage-style document drawn up by someone who was clearly a real attorney, asserting that a $15,000 family gift made during my marriage constituted a secured loan against business assets, specifically against Luster & Co., and that repayment was now being demanded in full plus interest. I read it 3 times. My hands were steady. I don't know how. I photographed every page. I emailed everything to my attorney at 9:14 p.m. with a subject line that said, "They're not done." She called me at 9:47. "Did you ever receive $15,000 from them?" she asked. "No," I said. "Never." "Did your ex receive any gift from them during the marriage that was used for business purposes?" "Not that I know of. He wasn't involved in the business. He had no access to accounts." "Okay." I could hear her writing something. "This document was drawn up in the last 30 days. I can tell by the filing metadata. It's also not notarized, which matters. What I want you to do tonight is pull every financial record from the marriage period. Every bank statement, both personal and business. I want to see if there's any deposit, any transfer, anything that could be even loosely characterized as a gift from his family." I was already pulling the binder off the shelf. "I'll have everything to you by morning," I said. There was nothing. I already knew there was nothing, but I spent 3 hours going through every statement anyway, every line, every transfer, because I needed to be completely certain. Because when you walk into a room to defend something you built with your own hands, you cannot afford to be almost sure. I was certain. My attorney filed a formal cease and desist the following week. It addressed 3 things: the fraudulent loan document, the coordinated review campaign, and the incident at the salon, which had been captured in full on my front door camera. She also contacted Google's legal team directly, flagging the review accounts as coordinated, inauthentic activity. This process, I will warn you, is slow and frustrating and does not move at the speed of your anxiety. But it works, eventually, if your documentation is clean. Mine was clean. I also did something I hadn't done before. I responded publicly to 2 of the negative reviews. Not defensively, not emotionally. My attorney helped me draft the language. Factual. Professional. We have no record of this client visiting our salon. We take all feedback seriously and welcome anyone with genuine concerns to contact us directly. We are committed to transparency and have been in continuous operation since year with full health inspection compliance on file. That last part was important. I actually posted our most recent health inspection certificate on our website the same day. The cease and desist did not immediately stop the reviews. There was one more, posted 2 days after it was sent, which my attorney added to the documentation file with what I can only describe as quiet satisfaction. What it did stop was the direct contact. No more visits to the salon. No more portfolio on my desk. Nothing from my ex either, who had been notably silent throughout all of this, which told me everything I needed to know about how much he knew. A week after the legal filing, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. It was my ex-father-in-law. I should explain he had been marginally absent during the divorce. Present in the physical sense, I'd seen him at the one family mediation session we'd attempted, but quiet. Deferential to his wife in a way that made me think he'd been doing it for so long he no longer noticed. He was the kind of man who had opinions and kept them to himself and occasionally looked at you from across a room with an expression that was almost apologetic. "I owe you an explanation," he said. He sounded older than I remembered, and probably more than that. I sat down. He told me that he had not known about the loan document until after it was drafted, that his wife had used his name on it without discussing it with him. Not a forgery exactly, since they had joint authority, but not something he had agreed to. He'd found out when my attorney's cease and desist arrived at their home. "I told her she'd gone too far," he said. She has a way of deciding what the right outcome is, and then working backward from there. She decided a long time ago that the business should stay in the family, through our son." "It was never in the family," I said. "It was mine." "I know that," he said. "I knew it then." There was a long pause. "I'm not calling to ask for anything," he said. "I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry for what was done, and that I'll cooperate with your attorney if it comes to that." It was, I think, the most honest conversation I'd ever had with anyone in that family. I thanked him. I hung up. I sat with it for a while. Then I opened my laptop and emailed my attorney to let her know. Google removed 5 of the 8 fake reviews over the following 6 weeks. The other 3 are still flagged and under review. My rating climbed back to 4.6, which is not where it was, but it's moving. My attorney sent a formal demand letter for damages. Specifically, documented lost revenue from the period when the rating drop affected our booking inquiries, which I had tracked in a spreadsheet I started keeping the week the reviews appeared. "The number is not enormous. It's the principle more than anything," she told me, "that tends to make these cases settle quietly. I have not spoken to my ex since the courthouse. I don't intend to." His sister deleted the Facebook comment. No apology. No explanation. Just gone. As if it had never existed. I have the screenshot. I always have the screenshot. Priya asked me once. This was a few weeks after everything had mostly settled, on a slow Tuesday when we were prepping colors for the next day. She asked me how I'd stayed so calm through all of it. I thought about it honestly before I answered. "I wasn't calm," I said. "I was organized," she laughed. "I meant it. Here's what I know now that I didn't fully understand before. There is a particular kind of person who looks at something a woman built alone and thinks, somewhere in the back of their mind, that it can't really be entirely hers, that there must be some gap, some dependency, some soft place where a claim could be planted and grown. And when that person is family, or used to be, they have access to a specific kind of intimacy that makes the betrayal worse. They know what documents to ask about. They know what words will make you hesitate. They know how to make a legal fiction sound almost plausible to someone who isn't sure of themselves. I was sure of myself. That's the whole story, really. I had the original lease. I had the loan in my name. I had 4 years of tax filings before the marriage existed. I had the contractor invoices and the equipment receipts and the bank statements going back to the day I opened the account specifically to fund the build-out. I had all of it. And when the moment came, I didn't panic and I didn't try to smooth it over and I didn't open the door and let them into my space and my life again just because the relationship had once been real. I handed the portfolio to my attorney. I responded to every review with documentation. I filed the cease and desist. I answered the phone when my father-in-law called because I had enough self-possession by then to hear what he had to say without it destabilizing me. And I went back to my client, finished the toner, nailed the color, and watched her face in the mirror when I turned her around to see the result. That's the part no one can touch. The work. The thing I made. Luster & Co. is still here. The lease just renewed. I'm interviewing for a second stylist next week. The health inspection certificate is still on the website, right there on the About page. Because I want everyone who finds us to know exactly what kind of place this is. It's mine. It was always mine. I have the receipts. I've thought a lot about what my mother-in-law actually believed when she walked into my salon that morning. I don't think she believed she was doing something wrong. That's the part that took me the longest to sit with. She had decided, somewhere along the way, maybe years before I ever met her son, that the right outcome was for that business to stay connected to her family. And once she decided that, everything else became logistics. The fake loan document, the coordinated reviews, showing up with a leather portfolio like she was the one with something to lose. In her mind, I think, she was just solving a problem. What she didn't account for was that I'd spent 6 years solving harder ones. There's a version of this story where I open that portfolio and feel small, where the official-looking document and the attorney language and the sheer confidence of her presence makes me second-guess what I know to be true. I understand why that happens to people. I've seen it happen. Someone walks in with enough authority and enough certainty, and something in you starts to wonder, did I miss something? Is there a gap I don't know about? That doubt is the whole strategy. It doesn't need to be legally sound. It just needs to make you hesitate long enough to make a mistake. I didn't hesitate. Not because I'm fearless. I wasn't. My hands weren't entirely steady that night when I went through every bank statement. But I had done the work of knowing exactly what I owned and exactly how I'd built it. And that knowledge was load-bearing. You can't destabilize someone who has already stood in every corner of what they've built and checked the walls. That's the thing I want to say clearly because I think it matters. Preparation is not paranoia. Keeping records is not cynicism. When I organized those binders, when I filed every invoice, when I set up the Google alerts, I wasn't doing it because I expected betrayal. I was doing it because the business was real, and real things deserve to be documented. The documentation didn't create my ownership. It just made it visible to anyone who needed to see it. And when my father-in-law called, when he apologized, quietly, without being asked, I understood something about consequences that had nothing to do with punishment. He had spent years watching his wife decide outcomes and work backward from them. He had been present and silent. And then one morning, a cease and desist arrived at his house with his name on a document he hadn't agreed to, and he had to look at what that silence had built. That phone call was him choosing, maybe for the first time in a long time, to do something different. I respected it. I didn't forgive the situation, but I respected the choice. Priya asked me how I stayed calm. I told her I was organized, not calm. That's still the truest answer I have. Calm is a feeling. Organization is a decision. You make it before the hard moment arrives, so that when the hard moment arrives, you already know what to do. I kept the salon. I kept the receipts. I kept my name on the door. Everything else sorted itself out from there.